welcome to my lovely office. I have some subtle holiday decorations there. I just wanted to make this video and talk a little bit about my path to medicine. There is a lot more non-traditional med students than I think people realize, and it's really nice to hear stories of people whose path to medicine wasn't just straight and narrow and was a lot more challenging, because I think there are so many people who come from so many different backgrounds and experiences who would be great doctors but end up not because of some hurdle or challenge that can seem insurmountable, because just getting accepted to med school is really difficult. So hopefully my story can give a little bit of insight and show that it's possible, and sometimes it just takes a little bit of extra time and a lot of effort. So before I get started, I would just kind of wanted to give a short and sweet timeline of where I'm at and where I'm going. I realize now that I must sound so incredibly scatterbrained and all over the place. So hopefully, for those of you who are still interested, you can continue on watching and listen more about my journey onto medical school. So that being said, I was born and raised in the Inland Empire. I graduated from Etiwanda High School in the year of 2013, and that fall I enrolled at UC Santa Barbara. To be honest, I struggled a little bit managing my time. I was a first-generation college student, and I worked and I volunteered and somehow managed to have a social life on top of that. I ended up graduating in the summer of 2017 with a Bachelor's of Science in Microbiology with a cumulative GPA of a 3.13 and a sad science GPA of a 2.8. That summer, that last term, I studied abroad in the Dominican Republic in a community public health program, and I realized I needed to do something to elevate my GPA because that was really preventing me from being a strong medical school applicant. So I spent about 8 months or so doing a lot of different odd jobs, working in retail, waitressing, and perfecting my application, which I then submitted February of 2018. I submitted the post-bac application through the UC Consortium of Academic Enhancer Programs, and I was accepted that summer in UCI's School of Medicine post-bac program. I did about a year of advanced undergraduate coursework at UCI, and I got a 4.0. And with the program's help and support, I got a 511 on my MCAT in May of 2019. And around that time, they accepted me to their med school. However, the fall class of 2019 was full, so they gave me deferred enrollment for next year, fall of 2020, for their diversity Prime LC program, which is essentially for physicians who want to work in the Latino community. I'm currently working at Jamboree, which is a low-income housing developer, as a supportive services coordinator. Essentially what I do here is I connect homeless individuals to different resources, whether that be job opportunities or health access, in order to help them stabilize and transition into permanent supportive housing. So that's kind of me in a nutshell right now. For those of you interested, you can continue on watching. So anyway, that being said, just a little bit of background about myself, about my family. I really came from kind of a really culturally integrated family. My mom's Chicana. She had my little sister when she was really young in high school, so she had to overcome tons of financial and educational barriers. She ended up getting her high school diploma, which is a great feat in and of itself, but she didn't have that traditional high school experience. She wasn't able to go to college, being a single mom. And by the time she met my dad illegally immigrated from Guatemala. He himself didn't get much more of an elementary school education. And the reason why I bring this up at all is because, my parents are so successful in their own right, and they've overcome so much, and they're so resilient, and they're such powerful influences in my life, in my personal life, in my professional life. And at the same time, they made me just so much more of a more open-minded and thankful, appreciative person. And I found it a lot more challenging when I went to college, because I didn't have anybody to really look up to. I didn't know anyone who had gone to UC Santa Barbara before. That's where I did my undergrad. I didn't even know how to even seek mentorship. And to be honest, I kind of went in not feeling like I needed it. I navigated high school and it really impacted high school. I did it pretty much on my own. I talked to my counselor once in my entire 4 years. They had a couple of workshops about colleges at my school that I went to, a couple. And most of the information I got about college was online. A lot of Reddits, a lot of online webinars, and it was really helpful. For me, I think it was enough to get me accepted to college, but it was not enough to get me prepared for the college experience. And while I was there, I did a lot of volunteer work. I worked at a House Scholar in the House Scholars program at St. Joseph. I used to volunteer at the Sea Center in downtown SB, which is a perfect place to go to if you're ever there. It's a very much of an interactive aquatic center, which is kind of hard to find. It's definitely worth the money. And I also worked. I worked at Devereaux, which is a behavioral and developmental living facility, basically as a caretaker there. And I worked at the Salvation Army as a program support staff at a transitional home. So a home for people who are homeless, who basically are there to connect to mental health resources in general, find jobs, just basically stabilize and transition to permanent housing. So that's basically some of the stuff I did. I also was a note taker. I was a proctor. I did that pretty much all 4 years. There's plenty of other little tidbits that I did outside of school at Santa Barbara. And the reason why I mention that at all is because my perception of being a med school applicant was to be a well-rounded med school applicant. Because when I applied for college, that's what I was. I was in track, cross country, soccer. I did a lot of sports, and then on top of that, I just focused on my academics, but it was more so of an equal balance. In college, I tried to approach it the same way, balancing it the same way. And I didn't realize, for certain classes, they require a lot more time and a lot more dedication and a lot more thoroughness, and you can't study sometimes the same way for one class as you can another. And in my freshman year, I did really well because in part I was on a science floor, so we got a lot of the people on my floor. We would study in the lounge, and we would help each other with homework. And going into my sophomore year, I didn't have that same kind of support system. We kind of branched off into our different majors, and we're taking different classes at that time, and I didn't really reach out for support outside of it. So sophomore year and junior year, I definitely struggled. I struggled in part because I think I didn't have a good study routine. I was overworking myself, and I just overextended myself in general. And the second reason why is because I didn't want to take out any student loans, not a single loan, and I didn't. And think about it now, I can go on and on and on and on about my experience at the Salvation Army. I can go on and on and on about my experience working as a House Scholar, because those experiences taught me so much about myself. They made me a better person. They made me a more non-judgmental person. It helped me kind of break down all these stereotypes and prejudices I had, and motivated me and inspired me more than ever to do medicine. But ultimately, all that time that I was taking away from school definitely hurt my GPA really bad. And I graduated with close to a 3.13 or I think it was a 3.13 GPA, and that was cumulative. And my science GPA was like a 2.8. And that is not competitive for med school. That is you basically might as well count yourself being weeded out, because it's just not feasible to get into med school unless you've done something for the president or something really along those lines remarkable. And so I remember at some point, I think it was junior year, my counselor had saw my score, my GPA, and he's like, you're not a competitive medical school applicant. You can pretty much either become a foot doctor, because their GPA averages are a lot lower, or better start thinking of another profession. And I didn't like his approach. I think it would have been a lot more constructive if he told me, are you sure medicine's the right path? Have you volunteered in a clinical setting? Do you know the responsibilities and the time commitment of becoming a physician? But him just kind of writing me off. At least that's what it seemed like. It was really discouraging, and the one gold nugget that he gave me was